So now let's output these variables. So what we could do is maybe in the console, and I'll just go back and refresh this page, and I'll go inspect and then console, so we can display the variables in the console here. I'm going to go back to my code and I'll do console.log user. Refresh the page and I can see Joe there. So variables are really useful for when you have information that you're going to maybe need to display or use several times during a program. I don't need to manually type out the user's name or a greeting or whatever it is. I can just reference the variable that already exists. And it's quite useful as well if we have information that maybe we want to display in several sections on a page, and if we want to update that information, we don't need to update it everywhere it's mentioned in the code. We can just go and change the variable once and it will apply everywhere else. So we've got that, we've got our greeting. Log that to the console, hello there. All right, so we can see that we're referencing those variables and then it's displaying what's stored in those variables. And I'm not using quotes in the last tutorial when I showed how to do a hello world message. That's a string and we had to display it within quotes. But because we're referencing a variable, we leave the quotes out and we just put in the name of the variable. If I put that within quotation marks, it would actually literally display the word greeting. Okay. One thing that we'll look at now is concatenation. So concatenation or concatenate means to join. So we can join variables together and maybe join a variable together with another message. So we could do something like this. We could use the greeting and then a comma and then the username. So we could say hello there, maybe get rid of that exclamation mark. We could say hello there, Joe. All right, go back and refresh. And that's what it says, hello there, Joe. It's joined those two variables, user and greeting, together using that comma there. It's joined them together. That's called concatenation. All right. We could also join it together and we can use plus as well, by the way. Instead of comma, we can say greeting plus user, but you'll notice that what that does is it doesn't add a space in between these two strings. So if we wanted to add a space, we could plus and then quotes and an empty space and then another plus. So what that's doing is displaying the greeting, then joining an empty space together with the username. And go back, refresh, and that's what it looks like. Or we could maybe add a comma there as well. So it looks like that. Okay. Now we could also join together other variables like score. So we could do something like plus your score is, and then plus score. All right. Refresh, and we see your score is 50, and then we could do plus, or we could do a comma. So we can use commas and pluses mixed in this console log statement. Say the average score is, and then maybe a comma and an average, which is the name of that variable here. There we go. So hello there, Joe. Your score is 50. The average score is 20.57. It's just displaying there on a new line. Okay, now we've done that in the console. We can actually display that on the web page as well. So we could change console.log if we want to document.write. And what we'll see is that instead of being in the console now, it's on the web page. All right, I can see here there's no space between is and 20.57. So because we used a comma, just need to put in a space there. For some reason, there we go, that's better. All right, so that's an example of concatenation. We've added commas and full stops, so we've added some text in there as well with what's displayed from the variable. So that's the greeting, that's the username, that's the score variable, and that's the average variable there. All right, Now, if I wanted to add a new line and maybe just have a sentence, welcome to my program, you'll notice that when we use document.write, it's actually going to display on the same line as the previous document.write statement, or the output there. So we can actually mix in HTML code. We can put in, we could use the break tag to create a new line. So BR, or the break tag, makes a new line. We could, if we wanted, we could turn this into a heading. We could wrap that in the H1 tags for heading, and it turns it into a heading. So you can actually output or use HTML tags in document.write statements. And if you're not familiar with that, make sure you go back and watch some of the HTML tutorials. Okay. One thing to be to note when you're using quotation marks in strings is you might need to escape quotation marks. So for example, if I said something like this, he said hello. So I'm quoting somebody, and I'm quoting what they've said within quotation marks. We see a little red underline here, and if we go back and refresh the page, nothing displays, and we get an error here. We get a syntax error. Now, syntax just means the rules of a language. So there are certain rules that we need to follow in a programming language. It says missing bracket. So what's happening here is it sees this quotation mark, then a string, and then another quotation mark, and it thinks that that's the end of the string. That's the end of what we want to say, and so it's expecting the bracket and the semicolon to then appear after that quote, but it sees hello and it doesn't know what that means. So what we can do is, if we literally want to see the quotation marks, we can escape them by putting a backslash before the quotation marks we actually want to see. All right, that works. Or what we can do is put the whole string within single quotation marks instead, like that, so that we can use double quotation marks within the string, like that. And if we wanted to use a single quotation mark, if we wanted to use a single quotation mark within this string, we could also escape that as well, or we could change these to double quotes. Okay, so that's a bit of an introduction into creating variables and outputting them on the screen, either using console.log or document.write. In the next tutorial, we're going to look at how to actually use these variables more. So we'll start looking at how to do maths, how to do calculations and store those in variables. We'll look at how to compare variables and what's stored in different variables. That's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching.